Welcome to the March OTC webinar. I am really excited about this topic. It is important to students all over Ohio. I recently read an article that was written by John Fink on the topic. The title of his article was "Don't Blame Students for Institutional Barriers to Equitable Transfer." And John indicated that of the students who enroll in a community college, 81% want a bachelor's degree or higher. Only 30% after 6 years will transfer. And of those, only 14% will get a degree. So obviously we want our students not just to transfer, but to succeed in getting a degree, and we want that opportunity available to everyone. Today, our panel will discuss what they have done at their institutions with equity. We will be joined by Dr. Jody Fournier, who is the provost of Capital University, Allison Morgan, who is the program manager of Cleveland Humanities Collaborative at Case Western Reserve University. We have Melissa Swafford, manager of the Transfer Center at Cuyahoga Community College. We have Shaka Wilson, who is the program manager of Dr. James L. Moore III's The Scholars in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at OSU. And Shaka was previously responsible for the transfer program from Columbus State Community College to Ohio State. So she has a combined and unique perspective. I really look forward to hearing these speakers. I hope you do as well. They have been very successful in providing equitable outcomes for students in Ohio. So let us start off with Dr. Jody Fournier. Oh, I forgot to say this, please. If you have questions during their presentations, and I certainly hope you have, you will please enter them in the chat, and then Jonathan Gates will moderate those, collect those at the end, and we will address them to our panel. And we will also ask you then for your observations and thoughts about equity at your school. So Dr. Fournier, please start us off.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to tell you a little bit about what we've been working on at Capital University in terms of equity and access for students coming in wanting an experience at a four-year private institution coming from a two-year school. What we found was back in 2012, 2013, we really as an institution started to focus in on overall student success and access and completion. And at that time, I can tell you, we weren't doing much at all. We were not intentional. We would report IPEDS data, but really didn't attend to attrition at all, didn't attend to what we were doing to help our students succeed, and really had no information about our subpopulations of students at our institution. I'm happy to say that it's all changed. We've worked really hard, created new positions, new structures. We had 146 action items that came out of a year-long self-study where we pulled together faculty, staff, students, friends of the institution, and it really has moved the needle at Capital. And I'm happy to report now that first-generation students at Capital now out-retain the general student population. Our commuter students that would languish about 20 percentage points behind residential students in terms of retention now out-retain our residential students. And we're making incredible progress on Pell eligible students, students from underrepresented populations, and we're approaching record rates of graduation. What we learned from this work was that we still had a lot of ground to cover. We found, we knew back in 2013 that a group that we really wanted to wrap our arms around was the transfer population. I will tell you, had many assumptions as a faculty and staff about transfer students, misconceptions. We had really no idea what we were dealing with and did not look at data. We were not informed. And as a result of a study I'm going to tell you about very quickly, we came to find, looking at data, that we were creating all sorts of artificial barriers that made it very inequitable for transfer students to come into Capital University. So a few years ago, I was having a conversation with the president of Columbus State Community College, and we were both talking about basically what I just outlined for you, the work that we had done in terms of student success. And I was telling President Harrison, we're looking at doing something to really improve the experience for transfer students. He was talking about going through a self-study, looking at how they send off transfer students to four-year private institutions. And at that time, we hatched a plan to sit down together, faculty, staff, students, and administrators from both institutions, Columbus State Community College and Capital University, pour through data, look at policies, do a full policy audit, and come up with recommendations for improving the transfer student experience. We made a commitment to put students first, to really create academic pathways that would be clear and transparent for our students, create articulation evaluation in ways that we hadn't done before at Capital. And we did just this. And so a couple of years ago, we sat down, started this self-study. We developed a great deal of trust between the two institutions. Whenever you share what previously was pretty closely held data about students and our success, and come to terms and open up and be honest about what you're doing, it really led to a level of trust between the two institutions that, at least for us at Capital, was unprecedented. We had the teams from both institutions visit each campus to meet people, get a sense of what the experience was like. And we poured through every policy, every procedure, and that includes how we evaluate transfer credits coming in for students, how we receive them, what we're doing to assist them or not. And what we found was, I guess, at Capital, aside from folks like Deanna Bond, who's in this meeting right now, the rest of the institution, I would give us a grade of D or F when it came to working with transfer students. We created so many barriers for students coming in that it's embarrassing. We created processes where we made it very difficult for students to transfer their credits in. And when we looked at data, we found that some of our best exemplar students who graduate from Capital without us even knowing came from community colleges as transfer students. Completely blew us away in terms of our assumptions about students. We also found that there is no one template for a transfer student. The transfer students, there's a huge mix and diversity of students coming in. And as a result of going through data, pouring through our procedures, we now have completed the self-study with about 77 action items that we want to move on. And I'm going to share very quickly, it'll let me here, the highest priority action items that we are putting in place at our institution in conjunction with Columbus State Community College. The good news about this self-study and these actions are it is not specific to Columbus State. We want to make a difference with students coming in from any and all institutions. First off, based on our new information, our new knowledge and understanding of transfer students, we now have a very public commitment, a philosophy statement, if you will, for dealing with transfer students that we push out through many communications or will to students coming into the institution. This is brand new for us. This is just getting voted through here on campus. We've also made a commitment to have a shared position between Columbus State and Capital that will help students be aware of pathways, transparent pathways between the two institutions. We will help the student through the transfer articulation process. As a result of seeing how many barriers we were putting up, looking at evaluating transcripts, this led to a complete revision of our general education program, where we no longer worry about what courses are students bringing in. We now have an emphasis on learning outcomes. So it's really revolutionized the way we evaluate transcripts of students coming in. We are designing a dual enrollment program with Columbus State. We hope to do this with other institutions. And one of the best things that's come as a result of this is we're finding ways to treat students that are going to transfer into Capital as Capital students before they ever set foot on our campus. So we are housing students from Columbus State Community College on Capital's campus currently. This is years in advance of them ever taking a class at Capital. We're opening up the use of all of our facilities, membership in co-curricular activities, student organizations, intramurals, and other activities on the campus. We're promoting and continuing the partnership where we had birds of a feather conversations, that Marty Malowski's term from Columbus State, their acting provost right now. We're continuing the conversation, faculty to faculty, staff to staff, and in some cases, student to student between the two institutions. As I said, we're really trying to build out this sense of community where we don't view students as transfer students, we view them as our students, capital students and the sending institution. And we do that from day one while they're at the two-year institution. Finding ways to have some focus areas around diversity, where we will have shared professional development between the professionals, the employees of each institution, and finding new ways to market the work that we're doing between the two-year schools and the four-year schools to talk about what we have at the two institutions. And then number 7, which is maybe the biggest inequity that we discovered, is that we have differential treatment for students who come in as transfers versus students who come in right out of high school or first time in college, wherever they're coming from. And we find this absolutely unacceptable. And we are going back to the drawing board, finding ways of having more equitable ways of creating financial packages for the two institutions. So that's just a little bit of the work that's been going on at Capitol. We will extend this work and hopefully find ways to share what we've learned with other institutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fournier. That was truly impressive, and I hope that we are able to hear more from you at a future date. Next, we have Allison Morgan, and as I said, she's the program manager of Cleveland Humanities Collaborative, which is truly a unique program. Allison, would you take it away, please?
Sure, thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Allison Morgan, and I'm the program manager for the Cleveland Humanities Collaborative at Case Western Reserve University. The CHC is a grant-funded program that was developed 6 years ago to create a transfer pathway for students from Cuyahoga Community College to help them finish their associate's degrees, and then transfer to Case to major in one of our humanities degrees. The CHC was created out of a recognition that we were missing out on student talent right in our own backyard, and that our Case Western community doesn't always reflect our actual community where we're located. Our first cohort of CHC scholars transferred to Case Western in fall 2016, and since then, 30 students have transferred from TriC to Case through our program. We've had 10 students graduate so far, and we are expecting another 10 to graduate this May, which is really exciting. Just this year, we've expanded the reach of our program to include students from Lorain County Community College and Lakeland Community College as well. Our CHC scholars earn an average GPA of 3.51 at Case Western, which is higher than our traditional population. And they're constantly winning awards and accolades from our faculty. Actually, when Jennifer Glynn's persistence report came out a few years ago, I just remember nodding along as I read through it because it really captured everything I was seeing with our own students. So as far as the benefits that our program provides, students who participate in the CHC have a chance to take classes at Case Western while they're still at their two-year institution. And this is really important because it introduces them to our faculty and our campus. I mean, albeit this year everything was virtual. And it helps the students ensure that Case Western is a good fit in both directions, both for them and that they feel like they would be successful at our university. These students then apply for full-time admission to Case Western with Case Western transcripts, and they frequently receive letters of recommendation from their Case Western faculty. The students also have the opportunity to attend specialized events and complete paid micro-internships and research opportunities. We also support them during every step of the application process to Case Western. While our program works with Case Western admissions, we actually don't have any control over whether the students are accepted. So what we've learned over the past few years is how to help the students tell their own stories to show who they really are and what they're capable of. The CHC director and I also write letters of support on behalf of each applicant, which we then send to admissions to be included in their application packet. And I tell this story a lot, but the reason these letters came about, so we do kind of a mini interview with each applicant just to get to know them a little better and to get them more familiar with us. But a few years ago, one of our students just casually mentioned that she founded a nonprofit and wasn't going to mention it in her Case Western application. So that is where that process came from. Once our students are accepted and if they decide to matriculate, they have to meet with our financial aid office to ensure that they understand everything that's being expected of them. Case Western does meet 100% of students' demonstrated financial need, which is fantastic, and that's a recent development as of a couple of years ago. The students participate in a one-week summer bridge program that helps acclimate them to Case Western and University Circle and helps them get to know the other students in their cohort if they're not already familiar with them. The students then participate in a sequence of 4 one-credit CHC courses over the next 4 semesters. So these classes focus on different topics, but they generally help students prepare for research opportunities, internships, and post-graduation planning. It also gives the students and us a chance to check in with each other, since students in different majors might never have classes with each other through their entire time at the university. We have established a peer mentoring program, and every cohort is assigned a Case Western faculty mentor who actually stays with those students from matriculation to graduation. I also personally meet with the students regularly to help connect them to resources and support them as they work toward completing their degrees. So 6 years ago, when we first started, Case wasn't the most transfer friendly of institutions. We had fewer than 50 students transferring in every year. And of those 50, usually fewer than 15 were from 2-year institutions. We had transfer guides up on our website for our local community colleges, but they weren't very robust. And some of the information was pretty old. We just didn't have enough students coming in to really keep them updated. Case would also not automatically accept transfer credit for courses that were taught online and typically left the decision up to the department in question. Since we know that course modalities aren't often listed on transcripts, this could cause confusion and frustration on the part of the students. We actually had to, the CHC actually had to go to Case Western's Faculty Senate to request permission for our CHC scholars' online courses to count automatically. So the good news is we tracked their progress over the last 5 years, and we have an external evaluator. She determined that the number of online courses a student has taken at their community college has had absolutely no bearing on their performance at Case Western. So while there have been no broad policy changes announced recently, I'm hoping that these findings, combined with all that we've all learned through COVID this past year, will help Case move forward toward being more flexible with these policies around online learning. So through the CHC and several other initiatives on campus, we've already seen a steady progress. We have seen steady progress regarding both our transfer friendliness and our accessibility. The percentage of our incoming classes that is made up of transfer students is increasing every year, and our community college transfers are increasing as well. Case Western established an Office of Student Advancement 2.5 years ago, which pairs every single undergraduate with a navigator who is tasked with answering their questions, meeting with them about concerns, and providing support until that student graduates. So as soon as a transfer student accepts their offer of admission from Case, they're paired with one of these navigators. That the navigator I have found is really important because they have an actual go-to person with a name, and it's not just an office where they talk to someone who's not specifically assigned to them. We have also established a dedicated PTK scholarship last year, and then with the help of some of our CHC scholars, Case Western now has its first student organization geared toward creating a community for non-traditional and transfer students. Our external evaluator conducted a survey 3 years ago that asked Case Western College of Arts and Sciences faculty if they'd had interactions with community college transfer students, if they thought the CHC was a valuable initiative, and questions in that nature. The results we got 3 years ago were really positive, but it also showed we had a ways to go as far as increasing community college student representation on campus. She actually conducted the same survey this past fall, and the awareness of community college transfer students, the number of interactions faculty have actually had with community college transfer students, and the general support for our program have all really significantly increased, which has been really, really wonderful to see. There's also been very vocal support for similar programs to be created for different departments to increase the number of community college students in the social sciences, for example. Even small things on campus, like our off-campus student lounge getting renovated, or our financial aid office creating a fee waiver specifically for independent students, are all signs that our campus culture is shifting to accommodate these students better. I honestly did a happy dance when I saw the phrase independent student appear on our website for the first time. So all of these changes that CASE is making, both on big and small scales, they're slowly helping us become a more accessible institution for students who live in our community. And it's just been a really wonderful thing to be a part of these last few years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. It's interesting that the theme of your presentation, as well as Jody Fournier's, turned out to be the transformation of your universities into a transfer-friendly culture. And I'm really excited about your program, particularly since it's in the humanities, because often our programs are focused on STEM these days. So it's nice to see college, university paying attention to the humanities as well. And now we have Melissa Swafford. Melissa represents TriC. She is the transfer manager there. And I was telling my staff just this week how if you really want to look for a model of transfer, it's TriC. So I'm eager to hear what you've done at Cuyahoga Community. Melissa, take it away, please.
Thanks, Deb. And I think one of the important things to think about in transfer, and why I think TriC has been able to work so diligently on it, we're actually represented by multiple entities. So I am part of the student-facing side of transfer. In the transfer centers, we have transfer centers at all 4 of our campuses. I manage the Metro Transfer Center. Currently, we're all virtual, so we work really closely together as a team. But then the other side of our kind of transfer world at TriC is we have a whole department dedicated to articulation, transfer, prior learning. I believe some of my colleagues are on here today. They really work to build, they work with our faculty at TriC and our university partners to build those transfer pathways, to build dual enrollment programs, articulation agreements. That really is the backbone of what we guide students through. Without, we can't, you know, if we had one and not the other, our students wouldn't be successful in the transfer process. And so we really need both together. So I am so lucky that when I'm working with a student, I have so many options to give them to explore. And so today, which is a little bit different than our first 2 kind of panelists, I wanted to spend some time, you know, one of the questions Deb asked us is why is equity an issue in transfer? So I want to talk about that, but also from the community college perspective and a student-facing perspective, I wanted to share kind of the importance of looking at the student experience. And I'm going to provide examples of things that my students experience that are obstacles and barriers. And so if you have not seen yet, I'm going to plug this a little bit. The transfer experience, this is the Gardner Institute's new book that just came out, and I've started reading it, and a lot of it aligns with a lot of the research that we've already talked about. But you know, when we think about transfer, you know, nowadays most bachelor's degree students who obtain them have some sort of transfer credit, and it might be they went to a community college, they transferred between 4-year schools. They have what we call an Ohio college CCP credit. So we must realize that this is more of the norm for student populations. But one thing that I think it's important to note for community college students that transfer to 4-year schools, they really do represent a more diverse population. They are more traditionally first generation college students, and they come from lower income families and are more likely to be recent immigrants to our country. So those are things to keep in mind. And when we think about equity, why it's so important, because this group of students that start at the community college, they are really the students that we want to help in terms of social mobility and attainment and social justice issues. I'm gonna provide a quote from the book that I think really kind of says why we need to put attention to this issue. Transfer student experiences and outcomes reveal a pervasive institutionalized pattern of prejudice and discrimination, resulting in the long-term inequities in the United States higher education outcomes, especially obstacles to upward mobility and social justice. And so, you know, as we consider this, this is why this is so important to us. And I'm so glad that OTC has taken this on. Earlier in the year, this past summer, my colleagues at TriC and the Transfer Center, as we were watching, you know, George Floyd protests and a variety of other racial-based incidents across the country, we kind of, you know, we had conversations, and it was, what can we do? And that's kind of where we started. And one of the things that I dedicated myself was trying to tell our students stories, because we feel like if our four-year partners or even our colleagues at community college can hear our students' stories, they will understand their experience, but also value them at a, you know, in their participation at their four-year institution. So, you know, as we have evolved at TriC over this past year, I feel like as individuals, we've taken steps to look at equity and transfer. As a whole, our TriC Transfer Center staff have undertaken multiple diversity trainings, but it's not just diversity training. We actually took some time to understand our own personal racial bias. We also looked at our best practices guide, which some of you might be familiar with, and applied an equity lens to it. So there were some outcomes of that, of things that we are going to take a look at and dive deeper in. And so those are just some things that we're doing. But then on an institutional level, TriC is currently participating in the Equity and Transfer Initiative that's sponsored by the American Association of Community Colleges. And we're specifically looking at different partnerships with one of our partners, with Cleveland State University, and that is our largest transfer pathway. And so as we've been building that information and working on the work plan of what work are we going to do, we are targeting 3 of our partnership programs with Cleveland State. And last week I sat down and I did talk with my colleagues in the Transfer Center, and we right out of the gate identified 12 different obstacles and barriers just in those 3 programs alone. And we did this by kind of taking a look, trying to take an equity lens and think about the student experience. And so, you know, some of those are easy fixes and some of them aren't. And so we have to work through that as a group, and we have to work through that as a partner. And I think sometimes we don't, we look at the data, which I think is great, because that tells you what is going on. What are the differences in outcomes? And it's really important to be able to see that. One thing we know at TriC, we were saying we really weren't diving into our transfer data based on different identity points. So that's something we've committed to recently. But once you start looking at the data, it tells you what. Sometimes you can figure out the why from it, but not always. And so for me, the why comes from understanding the student experience. And so for the rest of my time, I wanted to spend some time just sharing with you concrete examples of barriers I have encountered with students in their transfer process. And I think these kind of break down into 3 categories: kind of practices and procedures, policies, and then kind of resources in general. So the kind of first area is really kind of practices and procedures. And I don't think we think about this at all, but students have problems with applications, or they have challenges with applications, filling out, whether it's the application to the community college or to the 4-year school. You know, if you think about first-generation college student, they may not know some of the terminology is there. A concrete example is when a student is transferring to a 4-year school and it asks them, what college do you want to be in? Well, they're like, I want to go to your college. They're not understanding that there are different colleges within the university. And so, you know, some of the solutions we've come up with at TriC is we do provide the application support. So a student can sit down one-on-one or virtually with me, and I will walk through the application with them. So having that resource available to them. The Common App for transfer students is is a whole different ballgame for many students. So I get lots of questions, and we have to spend time understanding how to navigate that. Some other things, that I would suggest for a four-year school is taking time to do quick on-demand videos about walking through the application. If the application is the barrier, your students aren't going to walk in the door. So just know that, to kind of think about that. Another thing with kind of access to transfer institutions that I don't think a lot of people think about is just students' ability to get to your institution, to explore it, to experience it. Our students may not have reliable transportation. If you live outside of kind of their area of where they can get public transportation, it may be hard. Cost. So say they want to visit, a school that's 2 hours away. They have to plan for that, even if they have transportation, the funding that needs to get them there and back and all of that. And then some of our students, they don't have anybody to go with them. They don't have that same support system that traditional high school students may have, or students whose parents have gone to college. They may be on their own, or, they themselves or their parents might not be comfortable with college visits. And so some of the things that I would encourage schools to think about is partnering with community colleges to find a way to bring groups to their campuses, because that is much more a safe and reliable way for students to experience that. I've also seen some schools offering vouchers. So I had a student interested in school in New York, and that school provided financial support for her to take a bus out there and to stay overnight. And all of that was reimbursed. So there are ways to help our students connect. Virtual visits, we've learned during COVID, are an option. It's not quite the same, but it is definitely a way to help students. On the policy side, some of the things that I see that kind of are an obstacle for students is kind of looking at this idea of past failures really influencing an admissions decision. We have students who have had some really strong recent successes when they're at TriC, but it's almost that background of 10 years ago when they, attended XYZ and did horrible. Has had many consequences for them. Even if they perform really well at TriC, sometimes they can't get themselves back up to a 2.0 cumulative GPA. And I've seen some schools are like, okay, well, explain it to us. Appeal the decision that we denied you because your cumulative GPA. And that's great that they have an appeals process, but you need to tell students about it. That, I think it's really be upfront about it. And I've had other schools that just say, that's kind of our policy. You can appeal it, but it's most likely not going to get approved. So really encouraging schools to look past failures if there's recent success. The other kind of policy issues that come into play with finances, and I think thinking about this is many of students that might have those past failures, they might have previous balances at other institutions, which we know leads to a hold on transcripts. I understand there's really no way around that, but just understand that that is a barrier for that student. We many times will refer a student to a local lender in the Cleveland area that will provide no interest or low interest loans, so students can pay off those past balances and move on, because we really see that as an obstacle. We also find that some of our students have dependency issues when it comes to federal financial aid. They're under the age of 24, but their parents either are not able or unwilling to provide tax information. And there are ways around that, but it is a very long process. And so I encourage schools to think out how, at least in the short term, they can assist those students while you figure out the long-term financial aid plan. Because if it's, oh, we don't have it, we can't help you. Yes, you're dependent, you're under 24. That student's going to turn around, and they may, if they see what the obstacle is, they may not move forward. And so those are just some of the kind of policy things. If you can look at what your school's doing to support those students, it would be helpful to kind of level the playing field, allow them access to your institution. And kind of on the idea of resource issues. And I think there's a lot of us we always wish we had more resources than we do. And I will say we work with lots of partners and there are a variety level of resources. I would encourage schools, whether you're a community college or four-year school, to take a look at the percentage of students that you serve, your institution serves, that transfer. So how many are transferring in? And do the resources that you have dedicated to transfer students match that percentage? And then out of two-year schools, like in the mission of TriC, transfer is part of it. Transfer to university is part of our mission. And we have our transfer centers, and then we have our articulation department as well. And so I think it's important that the resources match where our student needs are. So I hope that helps you guys understand just how important it is to look at the little things that impact students. I think both the examples that we heard before are great progress, and students are going to benefit from it. And every institution goes through a different process to kind of examine where these obstacles and barriers are. So whatever process you use, I think it's important to actually acknowledge that there is inequity in transfer, and then work to address it. Ultimately, it is going to help the institution, the community, and the students. And so I leave you with that, knowing that equity will continue to be a focus for Ohio Transfer Council. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I really appreciated that. I love the discipline that you exercised, the critical thinking that you exercised in doing that policy review and doing that review of the student experience. And also thank you for the plug of the book, The Transfer Experience. That's really helpful. We are planning on providing that to everyone who registers for our annual conference. So that's a nice plug there. Next, we have Shaka Wilson, whom, as I said, is involved in a diversity program at Ohio State, actually a program manager, but has previously worked with Columbus State to provide smooth transfer for all of their students. And I think that's sometimes difficult with a huge institution, selective institution like Ohio State. So Shaka, would you share your experience with us?
Definitely. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Deb, for inviting me to share my thoughts today. I'm going to take a moment and introduce myself a little bit further to give a little bit of background on my experience working in the realm of transfer. Again, my name is Chaka Wilson, and I am the program manager for the Dr. James L. Moore III Scholars Program at The Ohio State University. The JLM3 Scholars Program is a student development initiative focused on underrepresented transfer students coming directly from Columbus State Community College. So that is one of the unique programs within ODI that is specifically geared towards getting that transition more seamless for students coming from Columbus State. Prior to my current role at Ohio State, I worked in the university as the CSCC advising specialist, again, working with students at Columbus State. The difference was these students were still at Columbus State Community College, but I was still planning programming to help support these students with that transition from Columbus State to Ohio State. So I did a lot of work with Mary Witt in the Transfer Center as well, and with partners across the institution at Columbus State. Prior to my appointment with that, I was actually an academic advisor for first year advising at Columbus State. So I have a lot of experience working with transfer students in both the community college level and the university level. So as many of you may know, one of the huge obstacles that students who are transferring experience is that transfer shock. So that increased costs, the loss of credits that transfer, and minimal transfer support systems, especially coming from Columbus State is actually a large community college, but it's still small in comparison to the Columbus campus that many of the students are transferring to. So if we add that to the fact that many students are transferring from a community college represent a more diverse population, as Melissa pointed out earlier, in a non-traditional population where no one transfer student is exactly the same. I like how Dr. Fournier pointed that out earlier today. It is critical that we all address the need for equity in transfer. So Columbus State and Ohio State have recognized this obstacle, and they have worked together to collaborate to make sure that they are supporting students the best that they can in that transfer. So one of the things that Columbus State does that is very beneficial so I'm going to come from the Columbus State piece right now, is actually creating that preferred pathway. So some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have not, but the preferred pathway is supposed to be more of that seamless transition from Columbus State to Ohio State. So I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to share with you what Mary Witt has created. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to do my best to share it. Let's put it that way. Let's see how successful I am. Oh, that's not it. No, maybe I won't share it. Oh, I don't know how to share it. But there are tangible academic pathways that students can use to learn what are the best courses to transfer from Columbus State to Ohio State. There are several different pathways that Mary Witt has worked with Ohio State units to make sure that the courses are showing Columbus State courses and the equivalent to Ohio State. Okay. There's also been collaborative efforts. Oh, sorry. I do want to mention that it's not just a thing for students to use when they are by themselves. The goal is that they're actually using that document and also still meeting with Columbus State academic advisors and Ohio State academic advisors as well. So the collaborative efforts also brings in Ohio State to Columbus State. So there is the University Transfer Center, again, that Mary is in charge of. And that is one of the great opportunities that students who are at Columbus State can meet with representatives from Ohio State admissions and academic advising. Well, of course, once the pandemic hit, that shut down in person. However, there has been a great transition over to virtual efforts, and students are still able to meet with advising regularly and also admissions regularly to make sure that they are being more proactive in their transfer, again, to help eliminate transfer credits not coming over, and also to make sure that they are meeting deadlines. Another thing, thank you, Mary. I was like, I didn't know how to share, but thank you. The other thing is the creation of my positions. So both of my positions were actually created to help with that transition support from Columbus State. And they were, one is funded by the Joyce Foundation. That was the one that was the CSCC advising specialist. And the other one is funded by the Weiler's family. And they just they knew that students needed the support. And I was just honored to be able to be selected for both of those positions to help with that transition. Some of the specific things that we focus on is providing supplemental advising to the students, and also academic success coaching, peer networking, and early connection to campus resources so that the students can be more proactive with that transition versus reactive. And I also like to think of approaching transfer in a 3-tiered process. So transfer, transition, and transform. Whereas transfer is the transactional process for moving from one institution to another. That's the admissions process, that's getting there. And then the transition is the process of changing from one state of mind, saying I am a student now at a 4-year institution, and fully acknowledging and engaging in that new role and becoming an effective student at that new institution. Lastly would be the transform tier. And that is when a student makes that thorough dramatic change and is immersed in the university and successfully moving towards their baccalaureate degree. In recent years, OSU has also developed a working group. It's called Campus Change and Community College Transfer Working Group, where stakeholders across the university, including students, staff, administrators, and faculty, work together to address how we as an institution can best support these student populations. So both campus change, students transferring or changing into the Columbus campus from one of OSU's regional campuses, and then of course transfer students with a high priority of students coming from Columbus State Community College, as Columbus State Community College students are one of the largest populations transferring into Ohio State. So we also have research and assessment teams that do an excellent job of conducting studies that help gather that student data and feedback. They do surveys, they do interviews with students to get the full picture of what it's like to be a transfer student, so that we at the institution can help increase that experience and have a more success rate with students transferring in, finishing, and getting that degree. That's about what I have for you guys today.
Thank you so much, Shaka. Like some before you, actually all three before you, you emphasized the importance of the collaboration between the community college and the university to make that transfer experience for the students successful. I appreciated it, and being a graduate 2 times over at Ohio State, I know that it is a university that can be confusing, whether you're transferring in or starting there. So I am really glad that you provide that support for students. Would you like to handle the questions now, John?
Yes, we have only one as of right now. So if you guys have any more, please keep putting them in the chat. But of course, the only question right now is for Chaka, and it's from Deb. She's asking, what is supplemental advising?
So supplemental advising is addition. So in my role, I was not an academic advisor anymore once I became a CACC advising specialist. However, I did have the knowledge of the academic advising at Columbus State and was very familiar with certain things that students should know to ask their advisors. So I never wanted to be that final decision maker, but I did want to lead the students into what questions they might want to bring up to their advisors so that they could lead those discussions both at Columbus State and at Ohio State. So that's why I call it more supplemental advising versus direct academic advising, again, because that wasn't my position, but using the knowledge that I had, I was guiding them on those questions to ask.
That makes total sense. That is the only question for now, but if someone, we can give them a bit more time, Deb, but you have that very important announcement. Would you like to give that now?
Sure, I will. But before I do, I just want to ask all of our participants if you're interested in telling us what things were new to you in the presentations that you heard. I'll share with you what I heard that stood out to me. First, that it was just a surprise from Case Western Reserve that a university would not give credit to online courses. It's just wow. So I'm really glad that Case Western Reserve has worked through that barrier. I also liked for the information related to the help that TriC gives for the application process. That stood out to me as something that we might consider, and also that review of policies, procedures, barriers with an equity lens. We have not done that, but I definitely think it's something that all could do. I like the emphasis on data from Dr. Fournier, and the idea that you all shared about bringing partners together. Is there anything that stood out to the audience, the participants here, of that was new to you, or an idea that you want to pursue in equity? You can unsilence yourself and speak out, please.
I just gave the ability to unmute, so they can do it now.
Okay. Any takers? You're all hungry, perhaps, for lunch that you're missing right now? Okay, well, then I will go on with my big announcement related to our conference. You will receive the application for the conference on Monday from Jonathan. And the conference is June 4th, which is a Friday. It is in the afternoon, and it is from 1 to 4:30. Our keynote speaker will be John Fink, who has devoted much of his research at Columbia's Community College Research Center on issues of equity, and has written many papers and has been a co-author of course of the Transfer Playbook. So I am excited to have him start us off, and then we will have breakout discussions that will be 30 minutes each, and we will also have, as one of those breakout experiences, a discussion of the book, The Transfer Experience, which, as you can see, Melissa is holding up. Melissa, could you tell us, I don't recall, I know that the subtitle is related to equity. Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, and the title of the book is The Transfer Experience, a handbook for creating a more equitable and successful post-secondary system.
Thank you. And I know that I've talked recently with John Fink, and he said that he was the co-author of one of the chapters in that book. So he was glad that we were using it. And I think that some of that came from the Gardner group, did it not, Melissa? I think that's
yes, it is edited by, so they have chapters are written by different organizations where they have expertise, but it was then edited really by the Gardner Institute and the folks there.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for the strong endorsement of the importance of equity too, Melissa. So that is going to be our conference, and included in the conference price will be rolled in the price of that book, as well as membership in the Ohio Transfer Council next year. So I hope that you will sign up for it. But it's also going to be followed on Tuesday of next week with a call from me for people to lead, moderate the breakout groups. So if you're interested in doing one of those, you've heard these 4 outstanding transfer specialists today. I am so pleased with what they shared with us. So if there is a topic on the list or a topic that's not on the list that you are interested in discussing on June 4th, we would love to have you volunteer and lead that, because the more people that are involved in this discussion, the better. So I think with that, do we have any, we don't have any more questions, do we, Jonathan? Is there anything you want to add?
We actually have a response to your former question. So
okay.
Becky Barnes raised her hand, so she can unmute now if she would like to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, hello everyone. I was just going to say, with, working with Case, and I just, it was a long haul, but it's so great that, meeting with the group for this, we've met a lot with their admission people and the enrollment people to talk about taking some of those barriers down. And everybody kept saying, well, they're not going to do this, if you don't ask, it's never going to happen. So I just want to encourage everybody, when you think that policies can't be, looked at and understand that the barriers that they're that they're causing students. So I just want to encourage everyone to ask those hard questions and, continually work on that with those schools, because, Case has been very, just like the online. I mean, they're like, we will not accept online classes. So, there was a lot of barriers that we could work through. So I just want to encourage everybody, when they think that there's barriers that they can't work through, I think that you can.
I really appreciate that, Becky. I think you and I were both in a meeting not too long ago that included Denison University, and Denison said that they do not yet have any transfer students, I think, from community colleges, but are looking forward to having them. So sometimes when we don't have relationships with the very selective admission universities, we may be put off and not ask those appropriate questions. So I am truly surprised at the relationship that you have forged with Case Western Reserve, and really impressed with the work that Allison has done. Again, you know, because my heart is really in humanities, I love that program too, but I also love the idea of giving a pathway to a highly selective university. So that's really wonderful. Well, we will look into more ideas at our conference. Someone asked, Andrew Coggins asked about whether the conference will be virtual or in person. It will be virtual. We thought that that was more convenient for you and probably safer, and possibly your institutions aren't allowing travel yet. And the cost of the conference will be $50. I have rounded up the $50 for my staff, and we're all going to enroll as soon as the application is made available. So I hope that you all will too, but for sure, let me know what topic you would like to address in the conference. I think it will be an exciting time to really dig into this more deeply, and it does deserve more time than just an hour. But I appreciate you all sharing your hour with us today, and look forward to seeing you in June. So thank you. Jonathan, anything else? You will be sending out copies of the recording of this conference, right?
Yes, so that should probably be going out early next week.
All righty, very good. Well, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. I hope we have sunny, warm weather. Bye-bye.
Bye.